This is CB Up for Discussion, a podcast series from Community Business where we tackle DE&I and wellbeing hot topics with special guests from across Asia.
Hello, I'm Dimutsa De Silva, and I'll be your podcast host for this episode. Today, we are delighted to be up for discussion with Shalini Mahtani, the CEO of the Zubin Foundation, and also the founder of Community Business. Welcome, Shalini. Shalini is a pioneering and a much sought-after voice for good in the D&I, CSR, and the well-being space. Her accolades speak for themselves. In 2009, Shalini was honored by the World Economic Forum as a young global leader, and a year prior, she was awarded the MBE by Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II for her services to corporate social responsibility in Hong Kong. She was also recognized by the HKSR government for her contribution to issues related to ethnic minorities in Hong Kong. Today, Shalini is the founder and the CEO of the Zubin Foundation, which looks at racial integration and special needs of non-local Chinese speakers. Although she stepped down as CEO in 2009 from Community Business, Shalini's vision and mission to build an organization that bridges the gap between the business and the community is still very much at the heart of our business. Right? Shalini, thank you for joining us today, and welcome back to Community Business.
Thank you.
So Shalini, to kick us off today, we would love to hear more about your journey since leaving CB and your work today with the Zubin Foundation. And what are your general observations around the state of equality in Hong Kong?
So, Dims, it's wonderful to be here. It's the first time I'm in the community business office after many years. So it's really great to be returning to see the team and meet them. So I left community business with the most unfortunate of situations, and so it was never my plan to leave community business. I had lost the love of my life, Zubin, and I went from a Friday night leaving work, leaving community business, clearing up my inbox because on the Sunday I was going to Cisco in Bangalore to speak about the research we'd done on women leaders. And in that weekend, the Friday night, my son, who was a healthy child, got ill and passed away on the Sunday. And so I collapsed, and life has never been the same again. So, and when something so monumental happens in your life, well, certainly in my case, I couldn't go back. And also I was so destroyed. So I never thought I would do anything again. I was really deeply affected by mental health. I still suffer from depression. But when Zubin had passed away, my son had passed away, a friend of ours who actually sits on the board of Community Business, Kishore, he had set up a trust account in the name of Zubin. And when Zubin passed away, a lot of people gave very kindly to that. And I had no intention of ever doing anything with that money. But then a few years later, Kishore said, look, we've got this money, you've got to do something with it. And so that was the impetus behind the Zubin Mahtani Foundation, which is a foundation named after my son. And so the Zubin Foundation is a Hong Kong charity whose aim is to improve the lives of some of the poorest people in Hong Kong who are ethnic minorities and who are people who are our colour.
Yeah.
And I'm very clear that the mission of the Zubin Foundation is to improve the lives by reducing suffering.
Right.
And providing opportunities. And we don't talk enough about human suffering. But for me, it was really important to stick that in our mission because certainly I suffered and feel like I still do, but I wanted to connect with humans who were suffering. and humans who looked like me. And I also recognized that I had created a platform from my previous life, and my community business really was a life before. It was a life before Zubin's death, and I was a different human being. I am changed by that experience, and the experience continues. So that's how the Zubin Foundation was set up, and I often wonder if it wasn't for him and his championing of me in my grief journey, if this would have happened, but it did. And because I had felt like I had suffered so much, I wanted to work with those who also suffered. And so I chose to work with the ethnic minorities of Hong Kong, which we knew at the time were amongst the most marginalized, but I had not done much work with them and for them. So the Zubin Foundation was set up, and the mission of the foundation is to improve the lives of Hong Kong's ethnic minorities by reducing suffering and providing opportunities. And in that work, we work with, 2 years ago, we worked with 16,000 individuals in the community. And we work with them through outreach, but also through driving systemic change. And our outreach work, we work with women and girls who are a very vulnerable part of the community. We have the only helpline for women and girls in crises. We have mentoring programs, upskilling programs. We work on opportunities. So we have a fairly robust internship program. We work with the Equal Opportunities Commission, and we get employers. And last year we put close to 50 people in internships. We also put people in paid jobs.
Right.
And we offer paid scholarships, 48 scholarships to people to go to university, which is massive because we all know education and employment change lives. We also work on mental health. We're the only provider of mental health, one-to-one counselling in Hindi, Urdu, Nepali, and English. And our mental health counselling to adults is known as the Ethnic Minority Wellbeing Centre. That is now being funded by the government.
Yep.
On a 2-year pilot basis. We also separately offer mental health to children in those languages. We work on families, so we are the only provider of special needs therapy to children with autism and ADHD in government primary level schools and mainstream schools. Occupational therapy, physiotherapy, speech therapy. So we work with neurodiversity, and that's quite a big thing. We also work with the elderly. So we now run an elderly program at our centre, and we work on emergency relief, getting food to the hungry. And that's all our outreach work.
Right.
Separately, we work to try and change the systems that resulted in these problems in the first place. Yes. So policy recommendations, we champion for greater representation on government committees, and we run something called the Institute of Racial Equality, where we go into companies, we go into universities, we go to social workers, teachers, members of the civil service, and we talk about anti-racism, we talk about D&I, I suppose, but from the race perspective and from the intersectionality of race and other issues, for example, race and gender. So that is who we are at the Zubin Foundation.
Thank you so much, Shalini. I think that's a lot of work, much needed, and there's so much more to be done. And thank you so much for Zubin also to be doing all of this. You took part in the race and culture research a few years ago as a market expert for Hong Kong. Have you observed any shifts or any developments since this piece was published 2 years ago?
So you talk about race and culture, and I think it's important from a community business standpoint to talk about this in terms of how it impacts employers. But my general belief is that if racism exists in the community, then it exists in the workplace. Companies seem to think that they're shielded from widespread beliefs that exist in the community, be it racism, misogyny, homophobia, whatever. Companies need to understand that they don't live apart from the community, they live in the community. So someone who holds racist beliefs at home, who may be telling his or her children that brown people are dirty and naughty and they shouldn't sit next to them in class and they shouldn't play with them, that same person, that father, will be working in your organization, right? So if discrimination exists in the community, it exists in your organization. So if once we establish that, we need to ask the question, does racism exist in the community? And with absolute certainty, I will say yes. I have been the recipient of it. You've been the recipient of it. And my clients tell us. So we've now established if it exists in the community, it exists in the workplace. It does exist in the community. And now the question is, what changes have we seen? Well, in the community, there is absolutely more talk about this, right. Okay? But talk doesn't necessarily lead to action. Talk is talk, right? So there is more discussion about ethnic minorities across the civil service, for example, across NGOs. There are more NGOs that are talking about ethnic minorities. Very few NGOs, though, have those ethnic minorities on their boards who are doing work on ethnic minorities or have employed ethnic minorities at a senior level. So yes, there's talk about it. In the workplace, I have seen some changes. So certainly with the companies that community business would work with, I've seen a few changes. One, there are far more companies offering internships to ethnic minorities. Okay? There are more companies that are looking at this from the corporate citizenship or community or ESG perspective. Absolutely. However, we are not really seeing the changes in the numbers of companies saying, right, we are going to actively look at bringing on ethnic minorities, right? So if I compare this to the gender discussions in the early 2000s, 2005, 6, 7, companies were starting to say it's not enough to say we're not going to be misogynistic. It's not enough to say we support women. We've got to put certain things in place. And I'm not seeing that yet.
Right.
I mean, I'll give you an example of a specific company that has brought on ethnic minorities to work and sit in various departments. But that specific company, the budget for those people has not come from an employment perspective. It's come from a community perspective. So we're bringing these people in, these ethnic minorities in, so that the individuals in the workplace get used to them and see that they can be productive employees. And then we hope that we convince HR to bring these individuals on a full-time employment basis. So I've never seen that anywhere before. We're basically taking them on as a charity initiative rather than a recruitment, employment, retention talent. So it's fascinating. I think we're very far in Hong Kong from the understanding that people who are ethnic minorities have value to give. I think that's partly because of misguided stereotypes that exist, but also fear. I think today in Hong Kong, there is a significant part of the community that does not want to speak English, for example.
Absolutely.
Right? So if I'm going to have to speak English, I might not be that good in English. I don't want to deal with it. I don't. So let's not employ the person with the ethnic minority. And we do find when the person with the ethnic minority is employed, they put on the team with the token white person, right? Because there's a fear to engage with them.
Right.
So I don't think we have the mindset yet to ensure that our workplaces are inclusive.
Yeah, also it brings back to that very important point where you mentioned, I think, we're also an extension to the society. If you come to the workplace, you're also part of the society. So whatever mindsets that you have at home, you bring to the workplace, and then it sort of permeates into every aspect of the workplace. So another thing you mentioned, I think that was very interesting for us to understand and talk about is there's the local nuances. I think when Black Lives Matter happened, and also the unfortunate events around George Floyd happened, in a lot of companies in Asia wanted us to help them find a solution to address it in Asia. But the reality is the race and culture conversations here are so nuanced and so different, which is why we embarked on the race and culture research. But from your standpoint, I think you've mentioned some of them, but what are things that companies do or can do to keep the momentum going to understand more about persons who are ethnic minorities, persons of color like us, especially in Hong Kong? I think that's a big conversation we need to have.
I think, again, each market is completely different. So there is no one size fits all. But I would say the standard advice I would have is understand race and racism in your market, right? And without that, it's very, very hard to address racism. So if I look at the context of Hong Kong, only 4% of Hong Kong is made up of non-Chinese. So 96% of Hong Kong is Chinese. And this is fairly a homogeneous population in terms of race. So then you've got the 4% left. That 4% is white and then mixed. And those two ethnic groups, if you want to call them that, are generally higher in income.
Yes.
Okay. And generally when the mass media and the administration talks about ethnic minorities, we're not talking about those two, although they are. And then you've got basically the darker skinned who are us, and they are low in income, low in education. Indians are actually the anomaly there if you take out the Indian data. But by and large, if you're South Asian or Southeast Asian, you've got higher unemployment, lower income, low education. Now, when you understand that, you can start to put interventions in place that address that. So what do I mean? If 96% of the population is Chinese and 4% of the population is not, that means that 96% of the population probably hasn't had much interaction with people who are not Chinese.
Yeah.
So how do you start creating interventions where this group and this group meet, right? Because humanizing difference is important. Because when we start to humanize difference, people start to realize, actually, we're all the same, right? We've got children, we've got parents, we have to make our mortgage payments, we have to eat. It's fundamental.
Right.
So the human interaction is really important, and you only get that when you get face to face. And then there are community and corporate citizenship programs that can help that, or internship programs. But then there is also the very important question of, now we've introduced them, we also as an organization, a company, know what is right and what is aligned to our values. And if it is aligned to your values to be anti-racist, to be racially inclusive, you have to make sure certain things are in place. So it means, for example, when you go out with a job spec, you say, as we saw for gender, I'm not going to accept a shortlist unless there is an ethnic minority on this. I am not going to accept a shortlist unless there's an ethnic minority on the shortlist. When we interview, we need to make sure that we have an ethnic minority on the panel, right? So you're putting various interventions in place to ensure that you're getting the talent pool in, and then they've got a fair chance at survival in the organization. And then you've got to put other structures and interventions. But I think that human intervention connection is very important.
So Hong Kong is perceived as a city of opportunities, yet social mobility can be challenging, particularly for ethnic minorities. From your experience, what are some key barriers hindering social mobility from marginalized communities? And what strategies can businesses and policymakers implement to address these barriers?
So maybe I should define what I'm talking about when I say race. So I'm using that as a generic catch-all. But in the Hong Kong context, I feel that race is inclusive of a number of factors. One is your ethnicity, Great. If you are Japanese, you're going to be treated much better than if you are Indian. Okay. Second is color of skin. The darker you are, the harder it is. So if you are from an African descent compared to if you are from a North Indian descent where you're fairer, there's going to be a difference. Okay, so shades of brown make a massive difference. Okay. Then there is language. Now, language is very important in our context because of what our history has been with English, Cantonese, Mandarin, and where we are today. And that will continue to change. And today, if you are an English speaker in Hong Kong, it's very hard to access opportunities at certain levels. It's virtually impossible. And then 4, there's the one of religion. And if you are physically, obviously a part of a religion, or it can be implied by people that you're part of certain religions, then life's tough. So, for example, if you have a beard and a turban, if you wear a hijab, life is far harder. So, although I say race as a construct for my clients is a bundle,
right?
And that is the bundle. Yes, Hong Kong has changed in the over 100 years that my family's been here, and I think that Hong Kong will continue to change. What was your specific question?
About the barriers to social mobility in Hong Kong.
I think that Hong Kong is the most expensive city in the world for real estate, and this is one of the greatest problems for all people who live in poverty and those who are classified as middle income and lower. Now, 1/3 of ethnic minorities live in poverty, and this is 1/3 of ethnic minority children live in poverty, and this is a very large number. The average size of a client's home of mine will be 125 square foot, and in that 125 square foot, there will be a family with father, mother, 3 to 6 children. So we're talking about the size of this room for a whole family, including the bathroom and including the kitchen. And when you grow up in conditions like that, your lived environment is a different lived experience to many. Okay. Then you go to school, you get on the MTR, you get on the bus, discrimination is rife. People will not sit next to you. People might close their nose because of the assumption that Indians are stinky. They might talk down to you in Cantonese, knowing that you speak Cantonese, and this will happen on buses and this will happen on the MTR. And then you get to school, where your school might be a Cantonese medium of instruction school, it might be an English medium of instruction school, but unless you're in one of a handful of schools, you will be, again, a minority. And if you are in a school where the majority are ethnic minorities, you will probably not learn the language. So then you leave school, and Chinese is one of the hardest languages in the world to learn. And that's not according to me, although I think it is. It's according to all research. You will probably speak perfect Cantonese. You will probably speak perfect English, but you don't read and write. But now the government has started to take your GCSE Chinese as a grade that can get you to university. So you go into university and you get through university, but you can't get a job. And the reason why you can't get a job is because you went to school, you learned Cantonese, but you can't read and write it. And the reason why you can't read and write it is because the support isn't there. And if you come from a family that is not Chinese speaking, your support at home is zero.
Right.
You cannot afford after school support, but also the acquisition of the Chinese language, the reading and writing aspect, can only be mastered through practice and time. Writing and writing sheets of Chinese characters. My daughter went to a Chinese school for 4 years.
Right.
And if you go home to 120 square foot, you have 3 to 5 siblings, and your parents are saying to you, look, you've been at school for 8 hours. You now have to help with the housework. You've got to go to the mosque. When are you going to to get up to speed, and
Right.
no one at home can help you.
Right.
So there are barriers all along from where you live, the discrimination that is constant, the lack of the Chinese language reading and writing to get yourself a job, the lack of support at home, the poverty. If you're a woman, there'll be other demands on your time as well. And so there are barriers after barriers after barriers. So if we want to improve lives of ethnic minorities, we need to walk in the shoes that they walk in.
Right.
We need to have our eyes open and be truthful about the barriers. And then we have to ask, how do we reduce those barriers?
Right.
And all of us can play a role.
Yeah.
It's not all about changing legislation. It's about changing mindsets. It's about getting resources to these individuals. It's paying for scholarships. It's making sure they get food in their stomach so that they can perform at school. It's all of that.
The Zubin Foundation also focuses on the mental well-being of ethnic minorities in Hong Kong. I had the privilege of attending one recently. From your experience, what do you think are some of the key well-being challenges ethnic minorities face in Hong Kong? Also, how can Hong Kong and the people of Hong Kong, through awareness, support the others, also support the ethnic minorities that live in Hong Kong?
I think that the greatest issue that adults, I'm talking about people over 18, face with mental health issues in my community is the conflict that exists with their families.
Right.
So, and the conflict that would arise would be based on different cultural expectations. So the Hong Kong born individual, let's call her a woman, will have expectations for herself that will differ from her parents. And often those that clash of cultures will result in higher levels of anxiety and stress and depression. And it can be around a number of subjects. It can be that the parents think that the woman should be getting married and not be focused on studying. It could be how the woman dresses. And, we have women who leave home wearing one outfit and have in their bag another outfit. And it's stressful. You've got to remember before you get home, you've got to change back.
Change back, right.
And so it affects education, it affects marriage, it affects how you dress, it affects how you speak, the reverence with which you speak to your parents. Are you talking back? Are you questioning? And so I think although we see conflicts, intergenerational conflicts across the world, and that's normal, you have the added difficulty of the cultural angle,
right.
where the parent might feel, look, you are Indian or you are Pakistani or Bangladeshi, and in our mind this means this and this, and the child feels innately, I'm from Hong Kong, and actually I have my own dreams and aspirations, and I respect you and I love you, but I have these dreams and aspirations, and there's a massive clash.
Right. Right.
But we've also seen actually a rise in discrimination, in people coming to us because they have gotten really emotionally impacted by the systemic discrimination that they encounter in their lives. Right. And, to have yourself called names at school, to hear it on the MTR and on the buses, to hear it in the market when you going to go to the wet market. It is a constant pinprick, that you're being told you're ugly, you're dirty, you're smelly, where are you from, why don't you return home? During COVID, it escalated. So I think that people are different, and at some point, some people crack, and it becomes too much.
My final question to you is, so we need to traverse from ideas to action, and that's, I think, the purpose of what we do as not-for-profits is, your vision has continues to live with ZB, in bridging that gap between community and organizations, and through your work with the Zubin Foundation, I think we're still trying to bring action and actionable change. So, what are some 3 things that you can say to our audience today that can positively impact minorities in the communities that we serve?
One is, I would say, just be nice.
Right.
It costs nothing to be kind and gentle. And so when you see an ethnic minority on the MTR, on the bus, I would say, just be nice, say hello, be genuine in that engagement with them, say hello. Because I will tell you, as an ethnic minority, that never happens. You get the exact opposite all the time. I think the other thing is, don't be a bystander. So speak out against racism if you see it. And hopefully, as a result of watching this, you will start to see it more, because your eyes are now wide open. There are no excuses. Do you have ethnic minorities in your family? If you don't, why don't you? If you don't, it's not because they don't exist, because there are smart brown people in the world, right? It's because there are blinders on in your organization. And the blinders need to be removed for inclusivity to begin. So don't be a bystander. And the third thing is contribute to organizations like the Zubin Foundation that work with ethnic minorities, because there is a direct link between the community and business. And as you empower people in the community, you empower your businesses over the long term. So invest in the ethnic minority community. Those would be my top three action points.
Thank you so much, Shalini. Thank you so much. I think fantastic. It is so heartwarming to hear these words from you, and I think it is so much that I know our audience would have gained inspiration from. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for your time and being with us today. Thank you once again.
Thank you for listening to CB Up for Discussion. For more information about our work across Asia, head to the Community Business website.